Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all doing well and you're having a wonderful week. Well, I think the first thing we should start with is some news that we've received. For the sake of transparency, I think it's important that you guys know we've received notification from one of the exchanges that's going to be listing us to say that they will not be listing us immediately. And the reason that they won't be listing us immediately is because of recent ICO conditions. They cite one specific ICO. I won't mention who they are. They're a large recent one that's not been performing well. And so essentially they're waiting until they start listing ICOs again. So it's important that we tell you this because, I believe fully in transparency. And as soon as we know, you should know. I think a lot of companies, or some companies, I should say, may not reveal this information to their community, but that's not the way we operate. So as you know, this week we're talking about marketing. So just to finish that thought, they will be listing us, just not immediately, right? Let's not misconstrue that. So we've been talking a lot about marketing. There's people that want to know what our plans are, what our strategy is for marketing. Some people can say that, some people are saying, we're doing nothing. I think someone recently said that today. So I want to lay out what my week looked like, what my week has looked like since last Thursday. So last Thursday I was in Cambridge. Excuse me, I need to switch off this messaging. Sorry guys, give me 1 second. Okay, so last week I was in Cambridge. As you guys know, I met with Professor John Crowcroft. I met with another professor, Richard Mortier. I had lunch with them. I also met with ARM. I had dinner with them, and I met with some PhDs. I met with some other students at Cambridge, and that was my week. That was Thursday. When we came back on Friday, I began drafting a proposal for what we talked about, essentially. I worked on that proposal all Saturday. I worked on that proposal all of Sunday. I worked on that proposal for about 12, 14 hours on Monday. And I worked on that proposal from about 9 a.m. Tuesday till 7:15 a.m. on Wednesday. So that was all night long. So for those who are saying that, we're not doing anything, that's not true. This morning, I'll give you an example of what my day looks like. And by the way, this is strictly in the realm of marketing. We're talking about proposals for end use cases and customers and users and pilots of our network, right? So this is the sort of proposal I'm talking about, is one that results in people using the things that we're building, right? This morning, I had a meeting with Google. I was in Google's offices in Victoria, which is in London. I met with Marlin PR at 1:30 today. Immediately after that, I met with a Cambridge PhD that we're interviewing for the sake of joining our research team. And then I have dinner this evening with SoftBank and with Deloitte. So for people who are saying that we're doing nothing, that just isn't true. I'm constantly and actively meeting companies and meeting people to talk about what we're doing and to look for opportunities to partner with them, to build products with them, and so forth. And I'm going to go into specific details about that today. So, yeah, there's been some questions about tokens, and maybe we just dive straight in. So there's been some questions. What happens if we release a mainnet without tokens? So firstly, it's not our intention to do that, of course, right? It's up to you guys what happens now. We have a vote. Someone's asked me for what's the date of the vote. I am aiming for the 7th of December. We've got a voting system that we're building, right, to make sure that this is fair and transparent. People have asked us, how do we know it's transparent? Because you're going to see the votes real time as they occur, as people cast votes. And so you will know which wallet address casted which votes and how many and so forth. So this is how you'll know that the voting process has nothing to do with us. We, meaning the team, cannot vote. We have no role to play in this vote. We cannot exercise a vote in any capacity, nor do we intend to or want to. So I hope that clears up questions about the transparency of the vote. So what does this mean? Okay, so let's talk about customers, because this is my primary focus, right? If there's one thing that I think differentiates Sparkster, is that we're focused, heavily focused on real users, real customers, real use cases, real problems, right? And the people that I'm meeting and everything that I'm doing is all about that, right? So the meeting that I had with Google this morning was about, how we might help them solve a specific problem using our no-code platform. Google is a customer of ours in one of my other businesses. And so there was an opportunity for me to go meet them. And I took that opportunity because essentially I took that opportunity to talk about how Sparkster's tools might be able to help solve their specific problem. Now, this is a project that's a year-long project. So am I telling you that they're going to be a customer tomorrow? No. But I do think eventually, there's no reason why they wouldn't be a customer of ours. And so the key here is, right, that in my opinion, customer adoption and real world use of the things that we're building is a matter of time. It's a when and not an if. In my opinion, there's certainty to this stuff, especially the no-code platform. A lot of people are expressing interest in what we're doing with the no-code platform because it solves real problems, right? The people that we're speaking to at Google, they're non-technical people. They're people that work in marketing, actually, at Google. And so they want to use our tools to solve some problems that they have. So this conversation that I had with Marlin PR this afternoon at 1:30 was focused on, we have come to an agreement now, specifically on what they're going to do and when they're going to do it and what that time frame looks like. So we have a launch with them. We have a launch with Marlin in February. And so we've now come to an agreement that they're going to be staging a launch campaign for us in February, right? That doesn't mean that the product's launching in February. It means that there's a launch of the marketing campaign in February. So what are we doing between now and February? Well, the products will be releasing shortly. And once the products are out there, then, we will bring on board users and create use cases, because there's things that we've got to have before we can begin the marketing, right? You can't just market without use cases, without this customer said this and this user built this. That's what we're going to be doing between now and February, so that when we do have a launch event, we can promote those use cases and what those people are actually doing with the platform. So that's what's going on. We're actively involved in recruitment. We're recruiting for the research team. I'm interviewing Cambridge PhDs. We're recruiting for social marketing. So, if you're interested in social marketing and you think you can help us, and you live in, well, I guess you don't have to live in London, but if you want to apply, please send your resume to hello@sparkster.me. And we'll take a look through it. There's a task you'll have to perform to kind of show us how you can make a difference, and that's kind of where we are. We have over 150 applicants at this point in time for the role. So let's dig into marketing before I take questions. How are we going to acquire real customers, and what's our marketing strategy for the platform? So I've kind of talked about this before, but I guess I'll go over it again in more detail. There are there's three types of users, but I'm going to focus on two types of users of the Sparkster platform, or two types of people that we're targeting. So we have a top-down approach for the enterprise, and we have a bottom-up approach for users, right? It's enterprises that pay us. So naturally, for us to be sustainable, we need revenue. And the enterprise has to adopt Sparkster's no-code platform. And I'm going to talk about the no-code platform first before I talk about the decentralized cloud, because they have two different marketing strategies in effect. So Sparkster's no-code platform is going to be targeting two groups of people. One group of people is leadership and management and chief information officers and such within organizations who lead development teams, if you will. And Marlin PR is working on creating PR for those types of people and reaching them where they live. We're also looking at campaigns on LinkedIn and Facebook. Older people now use Facebook. And so these people, these CIOs and such, they're probably in their 50s or so. They're avid users of Facebook. That's where they hang out. And so that's where we'll be targeting them with marketing. In terms of users, we're targeting people that have an interest in making. We're targeting people that are business users who are solving problems with spreadsheets today. But we're essentially targeting people who are interested in making stuff to begin with, and we're going to be targeting those people on Instagram and YouTube. But then, in addition to those two things, we're also working on specific vertical market solutions. So, for example, solutions in healthcare, solutions in automotive, and so forth. And those will be solutions that we develop and promote as sorts of use cases and sorts of things that people can do and use and can be built on Sparkster's no-code platform. The platform is actually soon to release. I have, I think, hopefully one of the final demos this evening at 6 o'clock today. So the platform's soon to launch. Naturally, there's extensive and rigorous testing that needs to happen before it gets released, but that's in the pipeline. We're also having the pipeline the release of our code. For those who say that we've got no code, code is coming. Code is required for some exchanges, so that's coming. Yeah. So now let's talk about how we're going to market the decentralized cloud and how this relates to tokens and the unlock and all of that good stuff that everyone's interested in. So the no-code platform is one thing. People can see immediately how it solves a problem. The Sparkster decentralized cloud is a paradigm shift from what people are used to. So they know about, traditional cloud computing. If you want to tell people, hey, why don't you, run applications on Sparkster's decentralized cloud? Well, it's not as simple as taking what they're running on their existing cloud and migrating it over to ours. Excuse me. Applications have to be constructed in a way that can be run on the decentralized cloud, right? You're not going to take an application that's 20 gigabytes or something and host that on someone's desktop computer. That's not going to work. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that such a thing could happen. So, and we talk about this extensively in the white paper, but essentially you're taking the application and decomposing it into smaller functions, and collectively those functions make up the platform, or make up the product that you want to run on the network. So what we have to do is we have to work with the sorts of teams in large companies that test out new technology. And those sorts of teams are going to be building stuff and essentially piloting our network. And so when I'm talking to large companies and I go and meet people, I go and meet ARM, or I go and meet, whoever it is that I'm meeting, Deloitte, for example, this evening, they would be piloting something on the network. And I'm not saying that they will. I'm proposing the idea to them, for example, today. But they would we'd be working with their research and development teams, and they'd be piloting this on the network. So the question is, does that require a mainnet where people have to pay for the use of the network immediately? No, it doesn't. Why? Because they're piloting this, right? So if they're piloting this, they want to test it out. Much like when Ethereum was first launched, it was the Ropsten network that was important. I think it was Ropsten, or whichever one it was, that was the first testnet where people were testing out what they were going to build. It's going to be the same here. It's going to be most important, so people can see how does this work, right? So people want to hear when the code is going to be released. We're hoping to release the code in the first week of December, right? That's what we're looking at, right? But naturally, you know, this is subject to things like security testing internally and whatnot. So that's what we're aiming for. And we're aiming to have the vote on the 7th of December. The vote will last a week, so everybody can participate, and that will be that. And like I said, it'll be transparent. So in terms of what we're doing in terms of the token launch, well, there's no point doing anything now. The tokens are locked, and there's no value that can be gained from what we do today for the token launch. We're preparing. We're reaching out to YouTubers and to see what availability might be like and whether they'd be interested in interviewing us and speaking with us. And that's an ongoing activity. So let's begin taking some questions, if anybody has questions. Someone seems to think the security tokens are the future. They're the future for people that don't have a utility in their token. In our case, the token is integral to the way the network works. The network can't work without the tokens, meaning the network can't work in a public mainnet sort of way without the tokens. If you go to sparkster.me/FAQ, it talks about specifically why, but I've covered that in last week's AMA as well. If the value of the token relies on an exchange and are locked, what use do they have? They have a use when there's customers, right? And we know when people want to use the network. The network can't run without them. That's what use they have. Can I explain the 3 types of nodes for you guys to understand what they do better? Yeah, absolutely. There's actually, so the types of nodes that we have, we've got a compute node, we've got a verification node, we've got a storage node, and we've got a master node. So compute nodes, they're the ones that do what's called, they achieve finality on a transaction. What that really means is that they execute the functions, right? So you've got data. Let me try and give you a concrete example. Let's say that you've got, I don't know, some medical information, right? So the data itself is the medical record is the data itself. The function is, for example, you want to find out, how many people have cancer. So that would be a function that's acting upon the medical data. So the functions are executed on compute nodes. The data is stored on storage nodes. Storage nodes come together to form a cell. And so a cell consists of many storage nodes. A cell is in its own blockchain. Verification nodes verify signatures and they verify the validity of a transaction and so forth. And master nodes are the puppeteers in the network. They're the ones that orchestrate everything that's going on and all the communication between compute nodes and storage nodes and compute nodes and verification nodes. They're also the ones that facilitate consensus on a block, consensus on a transaction. All of that stuff is managed at the master node tier. Master nodes are switched out we're thinking right now, what we've built right now is master nodes are switched out once every hour. So there's no centralization of master nodes. And so you imagine that there's a pool of master nodes, and then there's 21 active master nodes, and those 21 active master nodes are switched out every hour. And there's a self-election process of how a master node becomes an active master node for that 1 hour. And that essentially is generating a random number, a very, 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 very long random number. And the people that generate the lowest random numbers are the ones that get elected. So it's a proof of stake system because you don't need to have specialized hardware. You don't need to, perform a mathematical process. It's a probabilistic solution to elections, if you will. So hopefully that answers your questions about all the different nodes and what they do and really how the network works. And so, for example, what we're working on is we're working on specific use cases that we would be able to build with. So, for example, with our partners, when I talk to companies, we talk about how they might work with us to build a specific solution, a specific use case, or a specific problem. They tend to be an IoT. I don't, obviously the network's not limited to IoT, but when we talk about this distributed network or this decentralized network that we're building, a lot of people see value in IoT solutions using our network. So, we're talking about, well, there's one I talked about last week, which you guys can look up. And then there's other ones that we're talking about, for example, with monitoring air pollution, making local decisions and such. So this is where we're at. As I said, it's really, really important that we are working with companies to pilot solutions that run on the network. And that is what I spend a significant amount of time working on. It's what I've spent God knows how many hours at the beginning of this week drafting. Vic is asking, am I tired of these AMAs? He's tired of them, he's saying. AMA after AMA, when unlock? No, I'm not tired of the AMAs, actually. I think that as a CEO, I have a responsibility of being transparent with the network and I have with the community, and I have a responsibility of communicating to the community what we're doing, when we're doing it, and how we're doing it. So no, I think that this is part of my job. If you're tired of the AMAs, well, so be it. What I would say, though, if you're tired of AMAs, is those people that do listen to these AMAs and do listen to what we're doing, and the reason we do AMAs is because it's efficient, right? We don't have much time. We don't have a lot of resources. So it's an efficient way of communicating what we're up to and what's going on in the network, and for us to maintain our ethos of transparency. So, yeah. And I do think that the people that do understand what we're doing, there'll be a transfer of value to those sorts of people, the people that are going to benefit in the long run and who are going to, benefit and succeed in the long run are people that understand and know what it is that we're doing and why they're part of this journey. Because it is a journey, right? That building a multi-billion-dollar company doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with fake news. It doesn't happen with hype. It doesn't happen with partnerships that you pay for. It doesn't happen with partnerships that don't do anything with the products that you build. It happens with hard work. It happens with pilots. And that's what the people that listen to these AMAs learn about, right? Great. So I was sent some questions in advance that I want to make sure I get to. Okay, so Matty is asking about the $30 million that we collected. And, we talked in the past how we took out some insurance against this and, what's happened to that. So yes, the insurance is in place. For us to take advantage of the policy, it requires us to surrender the tokens. I'm not in a position where I need to surrender the tokens. And therefore, I've not executed on the policy. So that's kind of where we are. We've talked about hedging and other things that we might do. We've talked about, transferring to other stable coins and such. Might make sense for us to go into a currency if the price falls, take advantage of the policy. We profit from doing that. We don't know if that's in line with our philosophy on how we want to do things, or if we should be doing such sorts of things. It's something that I and my advisors have kind of got up in the air as an open question. How long can I fund things for? At least a year. Costs right now are about $100,000 a month, approximately. It's in dollars because we're an international company, and I can comfortably fund that for a year. It's also should be said that, these pilots, it's reasonable to expect that the people that we work with in a pilot will bring money to the table and they'll support some of the development. So yes. Someone's saying the Sparkster will pay me back. Yeah, well, Sparkster will pay me back if and when the price of ETH goes up. If Ethereum, if something happens to Ethereum in the sense that there's no ICO stop, no use case emerges for the use of Ethereum in the future, then the value of the value of ETH will never go back up, and I will not get paid back. So have I got skin in the game? I have so much skin in this game, it would scare you. That's how much skin I have in this game. That's why I have so much skin in this game that I wouldn't dare risk doing something that would be considered to be unethical. So understand that for those people that think that, I don't know, I don't understand the thinking behind this sort of question. But hey. One second. So question. I've talked about the date of the vote. We're planning to do this on the 7th. That is dependent on the voting technology working. We've got to make sure it's safe too, right? We don't want people messing with the vote. So the possibility of running tokens without running the mainnet without tokens. How are we going to integrate the utility of the tokens in the future? Well, the utility of the tokens is coded into the network, right? So, for example, there's a contract that keeps track of how many tokens someone has staked. As you stake and unstake tokens, the network the masternodes get notified by listening to an event that's fired on the contract, and essentially that's how they know who's staked how many tokens. And then decisions, the probability of a compute node or a verification node being assigned the opportunity to verify a transaction or to compute or execute a transaction or to even store data is determined by that probability function. And that probability function is a probability distribution function that's based on the number of tokens you stake. So this is how that communication between the staking that's occurring in Ethereum and the masternode and the integration of the network works. So we would simply, once that data is there, it's feeding into the thing. It's feeding into the masternodes. When it's not there, we populate it with some dummy data. Having a platform without tokens raises centralization concerns. What are we going to do to stop the network from being centralized? Well, you guys, it's not that we're the only people that can contribute to this network. You guys can contribute to this network. Everybody can contribute to the network if there are no tokens active. I think that the risk of centralization occurs when there's something at stake, right? When you guys have tokens at stake, it's really important that there's no centralization in place at that point in time. And I fully agree with you. And by virtue of the fact that anyone can run a masternode and the masternodes are the puppeteers of the network, Sparkster's network is fully decentralized. We have really no bearing on anything. And what's interesting is I did an interview with a YouTuber, I don't know, feels like a couple of weeks ago, but it's probably a month ago. And a similar sort of question came up, about this centralization and what's going to happen. So it was an interesting debate. You guys can listen to that. Someone said that we should consider a Sparkster box similar to hollow ports. So it's actually something that someone has suggested at Cambridge. And so we're thinking about that. It'd be a Raspberry Pi, essentially, that would be running with some data and such, running with our application and such, and have some local data to it. I can't tell you yet whether that's something we can do or not whether we can do, whether we will do in the short term. It depends on what specifically we end up doing, in terms of pilots. So let's take some questions from the community. So Anastasia is asking, is it a good idea to hire advisors that are connected to executives of large companies? Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, she suggested the London Chamber of Commerce. To be honest, I haven't thought or looked into the London Chamber of Commerce. Something to think about. But for example, we are in contact with a lot of people, and a lot of people in a lot of large companies. For example, the meeting that I have this evening with SoftBank and Deloitte. I have dinner with them, actually. So let's take some questions from here in YouTube. So someone's asking, can we, the marketing campaigns that I'm talking about, they're about use cases. So can we still do that if tokens are still locked by February? And I think, like I said, I think the key thing here is that there's a usable product. When people talk about mainnet, I think that they want a usable product, because at the end of the day, do they really want to be paying for compute immediately? Or are they going to they want to see that this is a fully finished product, or it's finished sufficiently for them to be able to see how can I build a solution for my business, or how can I use this new technology, this new paradigm to solve new problems that my company has. So a lot of companies, IoT has been talked about for a long time. Companies are now thinking about, how do I actually implement IoT? And it has a lot of problems. Distributed devices have coordination problems and all sorts of other stuff. I think we help really solve some of those key technical problems. So I think having a full feature product is the most important thing that people can work with and can build against and can deploy code to. That's what's important. So Waz is asking, in a non-walkthrough in environment, how are non-coders going to know how and where and what order to put the pieces that assemble the functions without knowledge of programming, syntax, or logic? It's a good question. So at the end of the day, we provide examples of this. We provide training on this, but you don't need to know syntax because there's no code. We, Sparkster, have created our own language. That language is based fully in English. There's no syntax in this language. It was developed in coordination with one of our advisors. He's a PhD from MIT and currently the chair of computer science at the University of Central Florida. And he's an expert in programming languages. He was involved in designing and writing Smalltalk and some other languages. I don't know them off the top of my head, but you can read his profile and you'll see what they were. So this is a domain-specific language that we've created, and it's Turing complete. meaning that it contains all the requirements that a full-blown programming language would need to have. That includes variable assignments, you know, I can't remember off the top of my head right now because it's been a long time since I thought about this. Conditional arguments, loops, variable assignments, essentially all the components that a Turing-complete language would need to have. Sparkster's language has. This is a language we have developed. Nobody else in the world has our language. So when people come along and say, hey, you know, Sparkster's the same as App Inventor, that's complete nonsense. It's complete nonsense. We have our own language that is far more feature-rich and complete than what you find in App Inventor. Our platform isn't limited to building mobile apps or small use cases. You're building full-blown enterprise software that runs in distributed environments, that integrates with smart contracts and blockchains and, you know, IoT devices, and streams the data from IoT devices in, you know, parallel data pipelines, and allows you to define logic that's being executed across within those data pipelines as data is streaming across them. And, you know, I mean, it's complete garbage, the idea that you know, we have copied App Inventor. If anything, App Inventor is our little brother. We are a full feature-rich enterprise platform for software development, and we are the future of software development. So how are you going to do that? Well, it's very simple. If you can think about your problem in terms of things that do something and data, and you can model your application, and, you know, we'll provide examples and training and so forth. So I hope that is a complete answer to your question. What price did Ian Delina get his tokens at? He got his tokens at 15%. He got his tokens at 15 cents, like everybody else, at pre-sale prices. But he got a bonus as a strategic partner, one of 3 people that got a bonus. Yeah. Appreciate your efforts. Keep it coming. So Woz is asking again, once someone builds an app with the code builder, can the code be copied or exported by the person who created it? Well, thank you for the question. Again, I very much appreciate these types of questions. The answer is no. You can open source the code in the sense that people can see the blocks of logic that are in plain English that you used to build whatever you've built. And you can choose to have that be open source. You can choose to have it be closed source. It's up to you as the originator of it. Also, the intellectual property is yours, not ours. Our intellectual property is only on the tools we create. But you cannot see the code behind it at this point in time. It is something that we've got planned for next year. But at this point in time, you cannot see the code. And that's because the code that gets generated by our platform is integrated with about 200 platform services that do the job of everything I mentioned a few minutes ago, all that enterprise coordination and such. But in the future, we're changing that. Not right now, but it's being handled by our internal research team to work on that. What projects do I use crypto for fun? Do I like collectibles, games, and other tech stuff or finance stuff? I actually don't use many things. I use Ethereum. I'm a big fan of Ethereum. You know, given that we've built contracts on it, and I'm a big fan of Ethereum. But I don't use much other stuff just because I don't have time. I literally work all the time. So I wish I had more time, but I don't. But, you know, in terms of things that I read about and keep up to date on, I'm very interested in physics. My first degree was in theoretical physics, actually. So I'm very interested in physics. I follow stuff that's going on in that world, the LHC and whatever. I'm very, very interested in history. So I read about different people. I was reading about Bertrand Russell the other night. I kind of read this stuff to not work, to get my mind off of work so I can go to sleep. Yeah, so that sort of stuff. I read about Brexit because I think it's going to have a big impact on this country. So, you know, there's a lot of negativity about Sparkster in Ian's group. How am I going to counter that? Am I planning to do a Telegram AMA in Ian's group? You know, that's actually a really good idea. I hadn't thought about that. I'm not a member of any group, I don't think. And I'm not a member of any group because, well, I'm just not. I'm not a member of any group. So yeah, that actually might be a good idea. That might be a really good idea for me to do an AMA in Ian's group. Are you going to be able to start building on the platform with the tokens locked? Absolutely. You can build on the platform. You can even run stuff with the tokens being locked. Absolutely. Who's going to be the biggest software user from day one? From the day that we launch it? I'm not sure. So we've got some news lined up. Obviously, there are people using it right now, right? So, you know, other than the people using it right now, who's going to be the biggest user on day one? I'm not sure. Meaning that what those people are using is our internal version that's not publicly available. When will the website be updated? This is one of the things that we're just not getting to. You know, we're not a big team, right? And naturally, scaling the team is something that we're limiting. We're controlling where we have expenditure, because I want to make sure that I want to make sure that we are able to focus the things that are important. We're able to focus on building marketing and so forth, teams for the launch of the product. That we're focusing our money on research and the future, so that we can and also focusing our efforts, our time on partnerships or customer use cases, people that we're speaking to, that we can launch pilots on the network with. So this is just one of those things that we're not getting to. But obviously it is one of the things we have to get to. What was Ian's bonus? It was 30%, as it's been published. I think it's sparkster.me/presale. Is the training, Waz is asking again, is the training that we're going to provide to teach people how to build software on the platform going to be free? Absolutely. Absolutely. We want people to actually build stuff, you know. Life is about more than profit. You know, that might be surprising to some people, but yeah, absolutely. Again, Waz is asking, we're saying we're not a big team. Who are all those developers on the website? Well, I don't consider, you know, I think we're like 26 now. I don't think 26 people is a lot of people. It's not enough. You know, it's not enough to get to everything that we need to get to. Yes, we're a team that's heavily developer focused, right? But it's not enough people. We need more. We need a lot more people. So how are we solving this problem? We're being really, really, really specific about the things that we work on and the things that we do. Is there any testnet before mainnet? Mainnet, there'll be the paid version of mainnet. There'll be the non-paid version of the mainnet, just like there's Ropsten in the Ropsten testnet for Ethereum, which is where people, Like for example, we must have built like 20 smart contracts. You build it, you test it, you realize, oh, this doesn't quite work the way we intended. You deploy another smart contract, and so forth. So, you do that on Ropsten, on Ethereum. So same thing here. Why is it that you worked only as a technical engineer for Cisco, and then you display it on Sparkster's homepage? Is it not better for you to display the companies that you worked for in direct roles? Well, what does it matter, the companies I've worked for in direct roles? What does it matter what company I've worked for at all? I don't think it matters, right? What matters is, can I deliver on what I say I'm going to do? And I think that you hear about that from us every day, every week. So I'm going to go back to the Telegram group if there's any questions that anyone has. Have I read about the new Ethereum upgrade that's coming? I know that there is an Ethereum upgrade that's coming, but I haven't had a chance to kind of follow up on what that is. I know that they're looking at using ZK snarks. And if I understood what they're talking about being able to reduce the size of, essentially the size of the packet, the payload, by using ZK snark signatures inside of each block. I think it's a really smart solution. I mean, it's a very creative solution, right? So yeah, I think it's great. Have I read enough detail about it? No, I have not read I don't know if there's a white paper about it or some technical detail about it. I haven't read that. I've read the general information about it. And it's just lack of time is really what it comes down to. When will the first dApp be launched on the Sparkster network? I've mentioned that there are a few in the works. So it depends on your definition of a dApp. Will you be able to build and deploy something on day one of when the network goes live? Yes, you'll be able to build and deploy something immediately. When is the first major thing that we are working on with our partners? It's, I'll give you a vague idea because I don't have concrete stuff today, obviously, because it's not concrete yet. But I would say Q1, Q2 next year is when you'll see, for example, this company is using Sparkster's network to do this, or we're building this with this company. That will be coming later on. But essentially, I mean, that's what it's going to come down to. We are building this with this company, and we're building that with that company to pilot, decentralized computing for the use in this particular use case. Any other questions? Can I explain the plan for exchange listings and market making for listings? Yeah. So, there's a market maker there's several market makers that we're speaking to. There's one that we've kind of agreed to use. In terms of exchanges, we've spoken to a few exchanges. There's two that have agreed to list us. One of them, I want to repeat this from the beginning of today's AMA. We were notified today that one exchange is delaying the listing of Sparkster because of their perspective on the ICO market in general, ICO listings. They cited some that have really performed poorly, and therefore they're delaying the listing of all ICO tokens. Well, not just all ICO tokens, but they're delaying the list. Yeah, they are delaying the listing of ICO tokens, but they're also delaying our listing, which they'd agreed to list. And what that means is that it's, the listing is inevitable. It is, it's going to happen. It just won't happen immediately upon listing. Greetings from Poland. Greetings. Thank you for joining us, Magic Bruce. Have we considered doing buybacks in the future? Yes, we have. Timmy's asking if if people don't agree with our locking strategy, is investor money insured? No, investor money isn't insured unless you personally took out, unless you personally took out insurance against your own, against the tokens you purchased. That's a personal responsibility. So at the end of the day, you get to decide on what we do with regards to locking or unlocking. You get to make that decision at the beginning of December. We hope to have a vote on the 7th. It will last a week so that everybody has an opportunity to participate. Only token holders will be able to vote. And obviously we know who's a token holder and who's not, and we can validate that information in a number of ways, actually. And the number of votes that you cast are in accordance with the number of tokens you hold. So we think that that's the fairest way to run this vote. And it's fully transparent. It's transparent from the perspective that you'll be able to see that which wallets are voting for which direction and how many votes they've cast. Ian Bellina has been rather quiet about Sparkster after deciding it as a Hall of Fame ICO. Is Ian having second thoughts? To my knowledge, Ian has no second thoughts about Sparkster. It's a question for him, but he's never raised anything to me that suggests to me that he's having any second thoughts. I don't think that he's said anything, but I don't think that he's been anything but supportive of us publicly, and privately, in both ways. Ian brings us opportunities. Ian introduces us to different sorts of people. So, yeah, I don't think that there's anything to suggest that Ian is having any second thoughts about his position in Sparkster. And that being said, I think that you guys would know from his history that if he doesn't believe in something, if his position changes over time, he exits that project, and that he hasn't done that here at Sparkster. So given the cost of $100,000 a month, can I personally fund this for a year? Yes, I can personally fund this probably for several years. Why was the hard cap 30 million? Well, we're building $1 billion business. And to build a $1 billion business, we need a lot of money. We need a lot of money to convince the world that the future of cloud computing is decentralized, to convince the world. It's not just convincing a handful of companies. That's the first stage. Convincing a handful of companies to pilot with us is the first stage. It's essentially what we're doing right now. It's the first stage of making or preparing the mass marketing strategy and awareness. When do we really need all of that money? It will be at that second stage, because that's when we'll need to really deploy a lot of that money. So that's kind of where we are. Is there staking? There's stake. Yes, we're a proof of stake protocol. There's staking really at every level. Every node needs to stake, if I'm not mistaken. So there was a point in time where we were thinking the verification node doesn't need to stake, but it does need to stake now. How long for unlock after vote? We will unlock, soon, very, very, very soon after the vote. Obviously, do we want to unlock on a day when the market's falling? No, to the best of our ability, we will not do that. But good. I don't see any further questions, unless I've missed them. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and for being with me, or this evening, wherever you are in the world. I want to thank you guys for coming together this week. I know that there's been, some tumult and some issues and, and everything else in the community. I understand it's a difficult time and it's a stressful time for everybody. The market isn't doing well. People are losing money. we're doing the best that we can. We're working as hard as we possibly can. Believe me, as hard as we possibly can to deliver long-term value for our token holders. And that long-term value is in the things that I've spoken about today. So, I want to thank you all for coming together. As I mentioned before, nobody owns more than 0.15% of our tokens. And so everybody is really interested. It's really in everybody's interest to come together and to unify and to work together. We're in this together, right? If you guys are seeing some issues, for example, in Ian's community, I need your help to set them straight about the things that they don't know. At the end of the day, all of, FUD comes from ignorance. When people say things about us that are not accurate, it comes from a place of ignorance. It's because they don't know, right? And so therefore, what I would say to you guys is that, please educate those people. Let them know why they're wrong. And in our community, it really serves everybody to be on the same team. It doesn't make sense for personal attacks. It doesn't make sense for people to be levying claims that are inaccurate against us or against anybody, frankly, or against me, or anybody, against another team member or against our project. If you have a question, within your question, don't assert an assumption. Right? Ask a question. I think everybody is more than happy to answer questions. I think you should see by now, I'll take any and every question that comes my way. But it's important that we refrain from personal attacks so that we can maintain a semblance of harmony in our community. We need each other, guys. We all need each other. I need you and you need each other. So above all, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for coming together. Thank you for the maturity that I've seen displayed among so many members of our community this week. Thank you. Have a lovely weekend.